Okay, today I'm going to talk about Buddhism and how it relates to uh, terror management theory. I just kind of want to give a human behavior cultural example of a culture that doesn't deal with death, doesn't approach death in this existential dread kind of way, and doesn't shy away from it. In fact, the Buddhist tradition is very embracing of the fact of impermanence. It's really an integrated aspect of their entire tradition. And so when you understand the background of Buddhism and the different practices and different cultural norms, it's a very well integrated aspect, the impermanence of that. So I would suggest that they've gotten beyond any kind of existential dread. I don't think that they're subject to the same kind of behavior effects that might result from somebody who's been raised in a more Western-oriented culture. That does tend to shy away from the reality of impermanence, death, and that kind of thing. In this presentation, we give 3 examples of how impermanence is integrated into that culture, and discuss how they're probably really immune to the negative effects of terror management theory, and in fact how it's become an actual positive thing, the reality of impermanence. So I'm first going to talk about the mandala. This is a very common imagery in Buddhistic tradition. Most people are familiar with it. Most people aren't familiar with the values that it's trying to communicate, the deeper meaning of the symbol. So show this. This is a clip from Kundun. It shows a mandala construction. You can see how ornate everything is, and it's all made with sand, done in very excruciating detail over weeks and weeks, and all done with sand. And once it's finished, they basically sweep it up. They generally don't allow pictures to be taken of it, and they don't preserve it for any amount of time. Now, from a Western perspective and an artist, our own art tradition, what's the point of that? What's the point of making a painting only to wipe it away initially? Our impulse tends to be to preserve it and make it last for as long as it can. But this is, even the wiping away is an important element of the tradition. So once, and this is done very respectfully, once the painting is finished, it's just done. They take brooms and sweep everything up, put it in a jar, and they say a little prayer and throw it in the river. And so this, again, this seems odd, this seems somewhat pointless, but there's really a deep meaning there. It's designed to symbolize how you can approach life, which is to give yourself to it fully, like all the monks put all their conscious effort into it, gave themselves to their work completely, and then let it go, then wiped it away. And so that's a life philosophy, that's a lifestyle, that's a life perspective. And so they actually don't shy away from the fact that things end. I know impermanence, the Dalai Lama talked about impermanence being central to the teaching of Buddhism. And this is one example of how impermanence is integrated into that worldview and that culture. Because it's a daily reminder, I don't think it's something that they shy away from. I think in general, it's probably one of the most peaceful populations as far as any kind of culture, any kind of large-scale religion. They have been very nonviolent as far as those religions go. And so I don't think that they're as susceptible to that existential fear and that kind of fear pump mentality. I'm going to go to a more perhaps disturbing discomforting type of approach to impermanence, but it's more direct than the mandala. But there's also deep meaning here, and this is the sky funeral. This is another Buddhistic tradition, and this is a life affirming actual approach. But when you come from a Western cultural perspective, it's going to seem maybe dark or sadistic. But the reality is, this is the reality of how things end for the human body. You die somewhere or the other, and in the sky burial, monks come and chop up, they say a little prayer, and very reverently chop up your body and feed it to the birds. And that's what the sky funeral is. It's done very reverently, very respectfully, but it seems just very gruesome, very grisly. But when you consider it, line that up with a Western funeral, which is tons of concrete, bronze, and formaldehyde chemicals, and is that really life affirming? When initially you think the body's preserved and they look pretty and everything seems perfect. But is that life affirming? The reality is there's a lot of resources that are wasted in that. But it's also kind of one way of running away from the reality of things, which is both those bodies are going to be eaten by worms one day, and that's a reality of every life. It's impermanent. So and that's the reality of the physical manifestation of life. And I guess what the religious tradition, so they intentionally, what's unique about that culture is they intentionally go into that reality, they intentionally embrace it. So, and it's done as a way to gain a sense of peace. So, as discomforting as the reality of your body being eaten by vultures, the truth of it all is that it's a very honest perspective. So, that's the sky funeral. I suspect that it would take a lot of getting used to understand the value of that approach to funerals. It would take a lot of reflection, but I think ultimately the honesty of it and the fact that it's not done disrespectfully, I think I see the value of that, and I can see how there's not much fear associated with death necessarily. There's not happiness necessarily at all, but there's not much fear surrounding it. So I'm gonna explore another scene from Kundin here. This just shows their approach. So there's the end of the mandala. And that's how they just let it all go. They sweep it up very respectfully, say a prayer, and very respectfully, scatter what they did. And this is symbolic of, embracing life, but also equally letting it go. And, they still grieve, but they do let things go. And that's an important part. They embrace the impermanence. So there's another scene here that shows. So this is the Dalai Lama imagining the people, the soldiers that helped him get to India, and he just imagined the reality of their fate. And the reality is they're going to get killed off by the Chinese, and so he's honest about that reality. He saw that in his mind, and he treated them very respectfully. This is the respect and the reverence, and recognizing that reality, and almost being at peace with that. So so he's not shying away from it at all, but he's not he's not constantly focused on the worst, so it's not a negative perspective, as I see it. But I don't think it's exceedingly dark. It's not comfortable. It's just, and it's not skewing things negative, but it's just respecting the reality of the situation. So these are 3 different samples of a different culture that goes into impermanence, that makes impermanence one of its central values that it teaches. And as a result of those cultural norms in that environment, their perspective on life, but also their I think that they've gotten beyond any kind of existential anxiety. I know that practice, when I watched it happen in my own life, there is an opening of peace as you recognize and respect the impermanence of life. And so it doesn't disregard any of the terror management research. I think it acknowledges the fact that if you run away from the fact that you're going to die and your impermanence, if you're in a cultural environment that does that, which is nearly the entire world at this point. If you're in that type of environment, then yeah, you're gonna be very susceptible to the fear pump. But I guess if you're in an environment that embraces the reality of the impermanence of life, you're not going to be susceptible to a lot of the triggering and the fear pump mechanisms that a lot of politicians use, but has been observed in terror management theory. So this is important other side of the spectrum dynamic to explore in human behavior. It suggests the way out of the fear pump dynamic of always being afraid of the next terrorist attack and what might happen, being kind of controlled like cattle. I think if you embrace the reality of your death, even just a little bit, even just humorously, I think, and also recognize the fact that, it's not very likely that a large amount of people are going to die from a terrorist attack. It's much more likely that some kind of natural disaster, disease, a non-enemy entity is going to kill you off. And the reality of the matter is everybody ends up dead at some point, and that's a fact of life. And so once you recognize that, you're not as susceptible to the fear. But it's not even a freedom from susceptibility. There's another positive dimension to death awareness, which is once you get over the initial discomfort, there's a level of peace that comes over you. And I think there is a way out of that paradox of, us having minds, and I know terror management theory talks about us having minds, and there's an unresolvable paradox of the fact that our bodies are impermanent and and we can imagine our own deaths. And but the resolution is, once we recognize that, once we embrace the discomfort of that idea, we can get through any of that fear and be free. Actually, the freedom comes not from running away from it, but from running into it and accepting that reality. Personally, I think that's what the Buddhist tradition culturally has been geared toward. There's many different cultural traditions that try to get through it by embracing, and I think that's a good path forward. But this is a good large-scale cultural example, spiritual tradition of the other side of human behavior, the other side of the terror management dynamic, which shows that you can get beyond any kind of fear control mechanism by embracing things, and that's the general idea. Thanks for listening, and just more on general psychology later on. Thanks.